Okay, everybody, grab your Holes book and open up to chapter 49. We've got 2 more chapters to read today, the final chapters. Dig it on, dig it. Sorry, a little technical difficulty there. Okay, so today we'll be reading the last 2 chapters of Holes, so make sure that you have your book and you are following along as we read aloud today. Our vocab word that we will be focusing on for this chapter is tedious. You don't need to write it down, but keep in mind while we are reading to be looking out for the word tedious. Tedious means continues for a long time and is not interesting. All right, chapter 49, we are on page 223. And as we're reading today, I want you to think about conflict and resolution. What has been the ongoing conflict in this story the whole time we have been reading? What do you think has been the conflict? I can think of a few things that come to mind while we've been reading this story, but the main conflict throughout this whole story has a lot to do with Stanley's no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing, great-great-grandfather. So I want you to keep that in mind as we read today. In the last few chapters that we read yesterday, we learned that Stanley and Zero were in this hole, and there were lizards, yellow-spotted lizards everywhere. So right now as we're moving into reading today, that is our main conflict. Let's figure out what the resolution is going to be to that conflict. There never used to be yellow-spotted lizards in the town of Green Lake. They didn't come to the area until after the lake dried up, but the townsfolk had heard about the red-eyed monsters living in the desert hills. One afternoon, Sam, the onion man, and his donkey, Mary Lou, were returning to his boat, which was anchored just a little offshore. It was late in November, and the peach trees had lost most of their leaves. "Sam," someone called. He turned around to see 3 men running after him, waving their hats. He waited. "Afternoon, Walter, Bo, Jesse," he greeted them as they walked up, catching their breath. "Glad we caught you," said Bo. "We're going rattlesnake hunting in the morning." "We want to get some of your lizard juice," said Walter. "I ain't scared of no rattlesnake," said Jesse, "but I don't want to come across one of those red-eyed monsters. I'd seen one once, and that was enough. I knew about the red eyes, of course. I hadn't heard about the big black teeth." "It's the white tongues that get me," said Bo. Sam gave each man 2 bottles of pure onion juice. He told them to drink 1 bottle before going to bed that night, then a half bottle in the morning, and then a half bottle around lunchtime. "You sure this stuff works?" asked Walter. "I'll tell you what," said Sam. "If it doesn't, you can come back next week and I'll give you your money back." Walter looked around unsure as Bo and Jesse laughed. Then Sam laughed too. Even Mary Lou let out a rare hee-haw. "Just remember," Sam told the men before they left, "it's very important you drink a bottle tonight. You got to get it into your bloodstream. The lizards don't lack onion blood." Okay, so we just read what the resolution was to our earlier conflict. Our conflict was that Zero and Stanley are in this hole surrounded by yellow-spotted lizards, but the lizards didn't attack them. Why? Well, we just found out the resolution. The resolution was what? Think about it. What is the resolution? Why did Stanley and Zero not get attacked by these yellow-spotted lizards? Do you got it? It's because they went up the mountain and ate those onions, and they had onions in their blood. And if you have onions in your body, the yellow-spotted lizards want nothing to do with you. Conflict resolution. All right, let's keep going. Stanley and Zero sat in the back seat of Miss Marengo's BMW. The suitcase lay between them. It was locked, and they decided they'd let Stanley's father try to open it in his workshop. "You don't know what's in it, do you?" she asked. "No," said Stanley. "I didn't think so." The air conditioning was on, but they drove with the windows open as well because, no offense, but you boys really smell bad. Miss Marengo explained that she was a patent attorney. "I'm helping your father with the new product he's invented. He happened to mention your situation, so I did a little investigating. Clyde Livingston's sneakers were stolen sometime before 3:15. I found a young man, Derek Dunn, who said that at 3:20 you were in the bathroom fishing your notebook out of the toilet. 2 girls remembered seeing you coming out of the boys' restroom carrying a wet notebook." Stanley felt his ears redden. Even after everything he'd been through, the memory still caused him to feel shame. "So you couldn't have stolen them," said Miss Marengo. "He didn't. I did," said Zero. "You did what?" asked Miss Marengo. "I stole the sneakers." The lawyer actually turned around while driving and looked at him. "I didn't hear that," she said, "and I advise you to make sure I don't hear it again." "What did my father invent?" Stanley asked. "Did he find a way to recycle sneakers?" "No, he's still working on that," explained Miss Marengo, "but he invented a product that eliminates foot odor. Here, I've got a sample in my briefcase. I wish I had more. You two could bathe in it." She opened her briefcase with one hand and passed a small bottle back to Stanley. It had a fresh and somewhat spicy smell. He handed it to Zero. "What's it called?" Stanley asked. "We haven't come up with a name yet," said Miss Marengo. "It smells familiar," said Zero. "Peaches, right?" asked Miss Marengo. "That's what everyone says." A short while later, both boys fell asleep. Behind them, the sky had turned dark, and for the first time in over 100 years, a drop of rain fell into the empty lake. So we talked about that our conflict throughout this whole story was that there's this curse on Stanley's family, right? And we are slowly starting to find out what the resolution is. And we've discussed it, that we think that the curse has been broken, but what proof did we just read that shows that maybe, most definitely, the curse was broken? I want you to think about that in your head. And as we read this next chapter, think about more evidence, more proof that shows that Stanley has broken the curse for his family forever. All right, people, part 3. Keep following along. You're doing great. Part 3, filling in the holes. Chapter 50. Stanley's mother insists that there never was a curse. She even doubts whether Stanley's great-great-grandfather really stole a pig. The reader might find it interesting, however, that Stanley's father invented his cure for foot odor the day after the great-great-grandson of Elia Yelnats carried the great-great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni up the mountain. There's some more evidence right there. The day after Stanley and Zero came up and down that mountain, that's when his dad found the cure for foot odor. The Attorney General closed Camp Green Lake. Miss Walker, who was in desperate need of money, had to sell the land which had been in her family for generations. It was bought by a national organization dedicated to the well-being of young girls. In a few years, Camp Green Lake will become a Girl Scout camp. This ain't no Girl Scout camp, but now it is. This is pretty much the end of the story. The reader probably still has some questions, but unfortunately, from here on in, the answers tend to be long and tedious. While Mrs. Bell, Stanley's former math teacher, might want to know the percent change in Stanley's weight, the reader probably cares more about the change in Stanley's character and self-confidence. But those changes are subtle and hard to measure. There is no simple answer. Even the contents of the suitcase turned out to be somewhat tedious. Stanley's father pried it open in his workshop, and at first everyone gasped at the sparkling jewels. Stanley thought he and Hector had become millionaires, but the jewels were of poor quality, with no more than $20,000. Underneath the jewels was a stack of papers that had once belonged to the first Stanley Yelnats. These consisted of stock certificates, deeds of trust, and promissory notes. They were hard to read and even more difficult to understand. Miss Marengo's law firm spent more than 2 months going through all the papers. They turned out to be a lot more valuable than the jewels. After legal fees and taxes, Stanley and Zero each received less than $1 million. But not a lot less. It was enough for Stanley to buy his family a new house, with a laboratory in the basement, and for Hector to hire a team of private investigators. But it would be boring to go through all the tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a year and a half after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. Another piece of evidence that shows even more so the resolution of this story. Stanley and Zero each received just a little bit less than $1 million. To me, that makes it sound like the curse has been broken. Okay, now we're going to fast forward to page 231. And this is a year and a half later after Stanley and Hector have left Camp Green Lake. At the top of page 231, it says, "You will have to fill in the holes yourself." There was a small party at the Yelnats' house. Except for Stanley and Hector, everyone there was an adult. All kinds of snacks and drinks were set out on the counter, including caviar, champagne, and the fixings to make ice cream sundaes. The Super Bowl was on television, but nobody was really watching. It should be coming on at the next break, Miss Marengo announced. A timeout was called in the football game, and a commercial came on the screen. Everyone stopped talking and watched. The commercial showed a baseball game. Amid a cloud of dust, Clyde Livingston slid into home plate as the catcher caught the ball and tried to tag him out. "Safe!" shouted the umpire as he signaled with his arms. The people at Stanley's house cheered, as if the run really counted. Clyde Livingston got up and dusted the dirt off his uniform. As he made his way back to the dugout, he spoke to the camera. "Hi, I'm Clyde Livingston, but everyone around here calls me Sweet Feet." "Way to go, Sweet Feet," said another baseball player, slapping his hand. Besides being on the television screen, Clyde Livingston was also sitting on the couch next to Stanley. "But my feet were always sweet," the television Clyde Livingston said as he sat down on the dugout bench. "They used to smell so bad that nobody would sit near me in the dugout. They really did stink," said the woman sitting on the couch on the other side of Clyde. She held her nose with one hand and fanned the air with the other. Clyde shushed her. "Then a teammate told me about sploosh," said the television Clyde. "He pulled a can of sploosh out from under the dugout bench and held it for everyone to see. I just spray a little on each foot every morning, and now I really do have sweet feet. Plus, I like the tingle." Guys, where did he get the name for this odor foot concoction? Where did he get the name from? Sploosh, right? That's what Zero called the cans of peaches that he was eating while he was in the desert all alone before Stanley came and found him. "Sploosh," said a voice. "A treat for your feet. Made from all natural ingredients, it neutralizes odor-causing fungi and bacteria, plus you'll like the tingle." Everyone at the party clapped their hands. "He wasn't lying," said the woman who sat next to Clyde. "I couldn't even be in the same room with his socks." The other people at the party laughed. The woman continued, "I'm not joking. It was so bad." "You made your point," said Clyde, covering her mouth with his hand. He looked back at Stanley. "Will you do me a favor, Stanley?" Stanley raised and lowered his left shoulder. "I'm going to get more caviar," said Clyde. "Keep your hand over my wife's mouth." He patted Stanley on the shoulder as he rose from the couch. Stanley looked uncertainly at his hand, then at Clyde Livingston's wife. She winked at him. He felt himself blush and turned away toward Hector, who was sitting on the floor in front of an overstuffed chair. A woman sitting in the chair behind Hector was absent-mindedly fluffing his hair with her fingers. She wasn't very old, but her skin had a weathered look to it, almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary, as if she'd seen too many things in her life that she didn't want to see. And when she smiled, her mouth seemed too big for her face. Very softly, she half sang, half hummed a song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. If only, the moon speaks no reply, reflecting the sun and all that's gone by. Be strong, my weary wolf, turn around boldly. Fly high, my baby bird, my angel, my only." The end. That's the end of Holes. We've made it through. Way to go. That whole chapter kind of just brought the whole book, whole story together. And this whole time we're reading, we're trying to figure out, is this curse going to be broken? How is it going to be broken? Is there really a curse? And I think that chapter did a really great job at bringing the whole story full circle. We were able to see that Stanley's family found good fortune, but only after this curse was broken. And it was only broken because Stanley was able to complete the mission that Madame Zeroni put his great-great-grandfather on years and years and years ago. So with that in mind, you guys are going to go ahead and complete the assignment that is on Canvas. It's a quiz, so you're going to type in your answers. Don't forget, for the free response question, you do need to include PQA and text evidence just like we do here in class. When you finish that assignment, submit it, and don't forget, while you are working on it, you can use your book. Let your book help you answer those questions. And then when we get back to school next week, make sure you bring your book back, because we'll have a final discussion, we'll review, and then we're going to take a test on the whole book, okay? Thanks for listening. See you guys soon.